Welcome to Balocco, the proving ground of the Stellantis group, a group that includes Maserati. We're here today to test a prototype version of the new Grecale SUV. It's a compact SUV that sits below the Levante in the range and probably goes up against the Porsche Macan more than anything else. I can't show you what the inside is like, I can't show you what the boot is like, I can't take off this wrap and show you the exterior is like, but we have driven it. And I can tell you how it drives. I can tell you a little bit about the range. The first model to be launched will be this one. It's got a 2-litre turbocharged petrol engine under there with a 48-volt mild hybrid system. So it puts out 300 horsepower and it's an active exhaust system and it sounds really good. As well as that, all Grecales will have all-wheel drive and it's a variable split system. So they're predominantly rear-wheel drive. The split is 100% maximum to the rear or 50% maximum to the front, showing what Maserati is doing with it. Mated to this 2-litre petrol engine is a ZF 8-speed automatic gearbox, and it comes with beautiful big metal gear change paddles. I can't tell you that, even if I can't show you that. The car has variable drive modes, GT, Sport and Comfort, and as this car also has air suspension, it gets an off-road mode as well, because it can vary the ride height. The interior of this Grecale is covered up. It's one thing we're not allowed to show you. I can probably describe it, and it is pretty impressive, this new middle here, where it's got a big touchscreen up high, and then it's got an angled touchscreen at the bottom which controls climate, and then loads of other things like lights, in this car the air suspension, other bits and pieces. I really like the new design actually, and in the middle at the top actually is a new take on the old Maserati analog clock. It's not analog anymore, it's a digital clock, but not like an old Casio digital either. It can be changed. It's a screen, basically a circular screen, and you can alter what goes on it. It can be a clock, it can be a compass, it can be a G-meter. What I saw on it as well was it can show how much braking force and accelerative force you're putting on the car. So really quite interesting. Anyway, the car itself. So mentioned this particular model has a 300 horsepower mild hybrid petrol engine. So it's a 2-litre petrol engine. To be honest, in the kind of driving we're doing today, out and about here on pretty much an open road, you don't feel the mild hybrid at work at all. It just feels like a powerful petrol engine. So there will be other versions of the Grecale eventually, probably one using the amazing V6 from the MC20 sports car, but this is the one that will be introduced from the start. It will be an electric version as well eventually, and that of course is the most relevant. This car could become Maserati's most popular, its biggest seller. I mean, SUVs and relatively compact SUVs such as this are on the rise still. It goes up against, very obviously, something like the Porsche Macan, but also perhaps things like the Range Rover Velar. So what does it drive like? Well, like a sporty SUV. Now this one's got air suspension and adaptive damping. There's 3 different suspension setups. You can get a completely passive setup where it actually has frequency dependent damping on that one. You can get just adaptive damping, or you can get air suspension with adaptive damping, which is what we're testing here. All of the cars get Comfort, GT and Sport modes, and with the air suspension you also get an off-road mode because the air suspension can alter the ride height. So there's 2 different ride heights possible actually for off-road driving, and then while you're driving on the motorway, etc., there's also aero modes, Aero 1 and Aero 2, where the ride height is dropped to make it more efficient, more aerodynamically efficient, and better at speed. We didn't get to such speeds today, so we're driving around a twisty course, a twisty test track if you like. This simulates a road, simulates a country road, and it's good. There's a lot of bumps. You can probably hear some of the bumps going on there, and what I will say is the chassis offers a great blend of comfort and agility. It never feels uncomfortable, not even slightly, not even in the sport mode that we went to earlier, but it always feels a bit sporty. So the steering in particular is really good. There's great communication through it. We're on greasy conditions, which is the worst for a tyre to communicate what's happening. And yet we know what's happening. In the comfort mode, interestingly, little bit more safety is built into it, so the car tends to understeer a little bit into the corners. It's quite safe. You just back off, and it's quite well telegraphed where the levels of grip are. In the default GT mode, actually, because that's the default, the middle mode, more goes to the back and it lets a little bit more slip, but you can feel it coming. It telegraphs it perfectly. You can feel loss of grip, and if you want to correct you can, but the stability control system is very quick and smooth. Notably, it doesn't just cut in and unsettle the car or make you nervous. It just smoothly controls it, which is really nice. If you go into sport mode, it dials that up a little bit more. So the exhaust is a bit louder, the steering is a little bit heavier, but it also allows a little bit more slip at the back, and it really feels very natural. It feels like a really fun to drive car. However, it won't alienate people that aren't looking for oversteer and fun to drive. So it does it all, really. This first drive has certainly given us a good first impression of what the car might be like. It sounds interesting too. It isn't an augmented noise. It's a exhaust and intake tuning, and it sounds sporty. And yet, when I'm kind of ambling along here, it's not intrusive in the least. When you're pushing on, you can really hear it, and it's fun. And actually, when you're pushing on, these big, huge alloy gear shift paddles are really interesting. They're really useful too. They're always there. Again, most SUV buyers mightn't ever use them, but those that do will love them. And actually those that don't will also love the quality, they're metal. And the interior in general feels of good quality. It's a very spacious car. The rear, this car is a little bit smaller than the Maserati Levante SUV actually, but the rear feels more spacious in this car. It feels a bit more practical. It feels like an everyday car for sure. I think when the electric version comes, it'll make huge sense. This particular model, it's a good entry point, it's a good starting point for the range perhaps, but hopefully the electric model in particular comes on a song later on. One thing I noticed in this really low grip road that we're on, test track that we're on, is just how much communication there is between the tyres and the steering. You know way ahead of time when it's going to lose grip or lose traction at the back, and the car helps you with it. You can turn off the AC if you really wanted to, but that's just not this type of car. The fact that I'm even talking about that, however, indicates that it is a sporty car, and Maserati, while it will appeal as much to people that want the technology, want the style, I think people will also really appreciate how well this car drives. It genuinely does, and it probably is one of the few potential rivals for the Porsche Macan on that count actually. The interior design, when it is revealed early next year, I think will impress people. The steering wheel itself is a D-shaped, so it's flat bottom steering wheel. It's a bit unnecessary perhaps, but that's the way everybody's gone. It's got a lot of buttons on it, so you can set up all the digital instrumentation, etc. You've got the drive mode down here, and actually the engine start button down here. So they've definitely tried to imbue it with sportiness, which is very much in keeping with the Maserati brand, isn't it? That's our first look at the Maserati Grecale. It's a very interesting new sports SUV. Maserati hasn't yet called it that, but I think it's undoubtedly that. It's an everyday SUV, you can drive it normally, but when you drive a little bit quicker, you enjoy your driving, you will enjoy this car. I think it really will be an interesting rival for the Porsche Macan when it arrives next year. Further in the future than that, when the electric model comes along, I think that will help Maserati's sales soar. We might have a while to wait for that yet, but it's something to look forward to. Thanks for watching.